She came to cook until the rugged warrior wrapped his arms around her and said, "Stay with me." Amara had always dreamed of something bigger than the quiet life of her small village. Every morning, as the sun rose over the fields, she would imagine herself in a place far from home, where new experiences and challenges awaited her. Cooking had always been her passion. From a very young age, she had spent hours in the kitchen, learning the secrets of flavor, experimenting with herbs, and mastering dishes that made even her parents' eyes sparkle. But in her village, opportunities were limited, and talent often went unnoticed. Still, Amara refused to let that stop her. When she heard about the opening at the distant manor, she knew it was her chance to step into a world she had only dreamed of. The journey to the manor was long and tiring. Amara traveled by bus and then on foot, clutching her small bag filled with clothes, basic cooking tools, and a notebook where she had written recipes she wanted to try. She walked through winding roads flanked by thick forests, feeling both nervous and excited. The air was crisp, carrying a hint of wildflowers, and birds chirped as if to welcome her. Despite the exhaustion, she held her head high. She was determined to make a good impression, even if it meant facing the unknown. When Amara finally saw the manor, she stopped for a moment, overwhelmed. It was massive, built of dark stone with tall windows that reflected the late afternoon sun. Ivy climbed the walls, giving it an ancient, almost mysterious appearance. The manor seemed quiet, almost too quiet, as if it held secrets that had waited for years to be discovered. Amara felt a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. She tightened her grip on her bag and walked up the stone path toward the grand wooden doors. The doors opened before she could knock. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a warm smile stepped forward. "You must be Amara," she said softly. "We've been expecting you." The woman introduced herself as Maris, the housekeeper. Her voice had a soothing quality that made Amara feel a little less nervous. She followed Maris into the manor, stepping into a world that was completely different from her village. The interior was breathtaking. Tall ceilings, polished wooden floors, and ornate decorations gave the place a sense of grandeur. Candles flickered softly in the corners, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The smell of herbs, polished wood, and something faintly floral filled the air. Amara's eyes darted around, drinking in every detail. She felt a mixture of awe and humility. She had never been in a house this large or elegant, and yet she knew she had to focus. Her role here was clear. She was here to cook, to create meals that would sustain and delight the people in this grand house. Maris led Amara to the kitchen, a space that was both vast and inviting. Copper pots hung from hooks above counters made of smooth stone. Shelves were lined with jars of dried herbs, spices, and grains of every kind. The kitchen had everything a cook could dream of, and Amara felt a rush of excitement. This was her stage. She would show her skill, her creativity, and her determination. As she unpacked her few belongings, Maris explained the routine of the household. "The master of the house prefers to keep to himself," Maris said, her voice lowering slightly as if sharing a secret. "He rarely interacts with anyone outside of what is necessary. He is a man of few words, and he can be intimidating. But he is fair." Amara nodded, taking in every word. She had always been independent, unafraid of hard work or challenges. A reclusive master did not scare her. The first few hours were a whirlwind. Amara familiarized herself with the layout of the kitchen, organized her tools, and began preparing for the evening meal. As she chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and arranged ingredients, she couldn't help but feel a little thrill. This kitchen, with its endless possibilities and tools she had never imagined, was a playground for her creativity. She worked quickly, efficiently, and with care, determined to make a perfect first impression. As the evening approached, Amara could hear distant footsteps echoing through the manor. Her heart skipped a beat. She had been told little about the master, except that he preferred solitude. But now the presence of someone else in the house made her pulse quicken. She wondered what he would be like. Would he be stern and intimidating as Maris had suggested? Would he appreciate her cooking? Or would he find fault with every dish? Her mind raced, but she focused on her work, letting the rhythm of chopping, stirring, and plating guide her. Finally, the moment came. A tall figure entered the kitchen without warning.
Amara looked up and froze. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen.
Broad-shouldered and rugged, with hair dark as midnight and eyes that seemed to pierce through her, he carried an air of authority that made the room feel smaller, almost as if the space itself respected him. His presence was commanding, yet there was a quiet intensity in the way he moved. He glanced around the kitchen, his gaze finally resting on her. Amara swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. "Are you the new cook?" His voice was deep and calm, but it carried a weight that made her attentive. She nodded, unable to speak immediately. He stepped closer, and she noticed the faint scar along his jawline, hinting at battles fought long ago. There was something undeniably strong about him, something that demanded respect without demanding it. Amara felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. He didn't say much after that, simply observing her as she continued her work. Amara felt a wave of self-consciousness, but she also felt a strange thrill. This man, who seemed so distant and untouchable, was here in her kitchen, watching her. She realized that her role was no longer just about cooking. It was about proving herself, about showing that she could handle more than just the ingredients in front of her. The evening meal arrived, and Amara presented the dishes carefully. She had prepared a stew rich with herbs, fresh bread, and a simple yet elegant dessert. The man sampled the food in silence. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she waited for his reaction. Finally, he set the spoon down and gave a subtle nod, a small acknowledgement that sent a surprising warmth through her. It was not praise in words, but it was enough. She felt a spark of hope and confidence. She was on the right path. As the night drew on, Amara explored the manor in small bursts of curiosity. She saw the grand library filled with dusty tomes, the quiet corridors adorned with paintings, and the courtyard where moonlight kissed the cobblestones. Though the place was beautiful, there was a sense of mystery, a feeling that stories were hidden in every corner, waiting for someone to uncover them. Amara felt both excitement and anticipation. She was not just a cook here. She was stepping into a world that promised challenges, discoveries, and perhaps even unexpected connections. By the end of her first day, Amara felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She was tired from the long journey, the hours in the kitchen, and the intensity of her new surroundings, yet she couldn't stop thinking about the man she had glimpsed. There was something about him, something that made her heart race and her mind curious. She knew that her time in this manor would not be ordinary. There was a story unfolding here, and she was part of it now, whether she realized it or not. As she prepared for bed in the small room allocated to her, Amara reflected on the day. She had faced her nerves, navigated an unfamiliar environment, and held her own in the kitchen. She had also encountered someone who intrigued her, someone who seemed both formidable and human in ways she could not yet understand. A sense of anticipation settled over her. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring more challenges, more discoveries, and perhaps the beginning of something that would change her life forever. With a deep breath, Amara lay down, letting the quiet hum of the manor settle around her. The distant sound of the night wind through the trees was soothing, almost like a promise. She closed her eyes, imagining the days to come. She did not know what awaited her. She only knew that she was ready to face it. And for the first time in a long while, she felt that life outside her village, full of unknowns and possibilities, was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Amara awoke before dawn, the first rays of sunlight peeking through her small window. The manor was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy with secrets and stories waiting to be discovered. She stretched, rubbed her eyes, and reminded herself why she had come so far. Today, she would show her skill in the kitchen again. She would prove that she belonged here, not just as someone who cooked, but as someone capable, confident, and determined. The kitchen was already warm from the ovens, and the scent of fresh bread filled the air. Amara moved swiftly, arranging ingredients and preparing breakfast for the household. She worked with precision, her hands steady despite the lingering nerves from the previous day. Every movement, every slice, every stir was a statement of her dedication. She wanted to leave no room for doubt. As she focused on kneading the dough, she suddenly felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly and nearly dropped the rolling pin in her hands. There, standing in the doorway, was KL. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to take in every detail of her movements. He did not speak immediately. He simply observed, the silence between them stretching long enough for Amara's heart to race. Finally he spoke, his voice low but firm. "You move well for someone new." The words were simple, but they carried weight. It was not praise in the usual sense. He did not smile or nod in obvious approval, but there was an acknowledgement in his tone that made Amara feel seen. She nodded, not trusting her voice at first, then said, "Thank you, sir. I will do my best." Kale's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer. Then, without another word, he turned and left the kitchen. Amara exhaled slowly, relief and curiosity swirling together. He was different from anyone she had met before, stern, quiet, and intense, yet there was a subtle depth to him, a sense that beneath the rugged exterior he carried stories and emotions he rarely shared. She wondered what had made him so guarded, but she pushed the thought aside. For now, her focus was on cooking. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Amara prepared meals for the staff and household, moving with a confidence that grew with every task. He noticed small details, the way Kale sometimes watched her from a distance, the way the staff seemed both wary and respectful around him. There was tension in the air, yes, but there was also curiosity, a quiet energy that hinted at hidden connections waiting to be formed. By mid-afternoon, Kale returned to the kitchen, this time without warning. He stood silently by the doorway, watching her work as if studying her. Amara felt a flush rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from the intensity of his gaze. She continued chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and arranging ingredients, trying to focus, but she was acutely aware of his presence. "Do you know your way around a kitchen?" he asked finally, his tone neutral but sharp. Amara straightened, meeting his eyes. "Yes, sir. I have experience, and I enjoy learning new techniques as well." Kale nodded slightly, then moved closer. He leaned over to examine a dish she was preparing, his movements precise and deliberate. Amara's heart beat faster. There was something about the way he observed, not critically, but with a careful attention that suggested he valued skill and effort. "You have a good technique," he said after a moment. "Most newcomers are clumsy, nervous. You are steady." Amara smiled faintly, a mix of pride and nervousness. "Thank you. I want to do well." "I want to contribute here." Kale's gaze softened for a brief second before returning to its usual intensity. "Be careful not to let pride cloud your work," he said. "Skill is important, but so is focus. One mistake can cost much in the wrong place." Amara nodded, taking in his words. There was a seriousness to everything he said, a weight that made her realize this was not just a household. It was a place where excellence was expected and where mistakes might have consequences beyond what she could see. She felt a thrill of challenge. This was exactly what she had hoped for, a chance to test herself, to grow, to prove her worth. The afternoon continued, and Kale remained in the kitchen longer than before. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he observed silently. Amara began to notice small details about him, the way he handled knives, the precision in his movements, the quiet confidence that came from years of experience. Despite his stern demeanor, there were moments when his eyes softened, fleeting glimpses of a man who had seen much in life, yet still had a part of himself waiting to be understood. Later, as she prepared a stew simmering with herbs, Kale stepped closer again. This time, he did not just observe, he offered a suggestion. "A pinch more thyme," he said simply. "It will bring out the flavor." Amara followed his advice, surprised by how calm she felt under his guidance. There was no harshness in his words, only a quiet authority that made her respect him even more. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will try it." He nodded once, and for a moment they worked together in silence. The kitchen, usually filled with clattering pots and chatter, seemed suspended in time. Amara felt a strange connection forming, not a friendship, not yet, but a recognition of effort, skill, and shared purpose. She realized that beneath his rugged exterior, Cale was not unapproachable. He simply required patience, understanding, and respect. As evening approached, the manor was bathed in golden light. Amara had prepared a meal she was proud of, and she presented it carefully, aware that Cale would judge its quality more critically than anyone else. He sampled the food, his expression unreadable. Amara held her breath, waiting. Finally, he set down his spoon and looked at her. "Acceptable," he said simply, then paused. "Better than I expected." Amara felt a wave of relief and pride. His words were not extravagant praise, but they were meaningful. For Cale, this acknowledgment was a rare gift. He smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she could not fully explain. This was more than recognition of her skill. It was a small bridge between them, a first step toward understanding and trust. The night deepened, and the manor settled into quiet. Amara cleaned the kitchen and prepared for the next day. Her mind wandered back to Cale, his intensity, his presence, the way he seemed both distant and yet undeniably drawn to effort and sincerity. She felt a mixture of curiosity and nervous anticipation. She knew that her time in this manor would challenge her in ways she had never imagined. She also knew that Cale was a part of that challenge, and perhaps a part of something more, something she did not yet understand. Before heading to her room, she paused in the hallway, hearing faint footsteps. Cale was walking toward his study, and for a moment he glanced in her direction. Their eyes met, and in that instant, Amara felt a quiet recognition. Neither of them spoke, yet the glance said more than words could convey. There was respect, curiosity, and the beginning of a connection that neither fully understood. That night, as Amara lay in bed, she replayed the day in her mind. She thought of the manor, the kitchen, the dishes she had prepared, and most of all, the man who had observed her so closely. She realized that this place, with all its grandeur and mystery, was becoming more than just a workplace. It was a world filled with challenges, lessons, and possibilities. And Cale, in his quiet, commanding way, was a part of that world she was only beginning to understand. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, Amara dreamt of the manor, the kitchen, and the man whose presence both intimidated and intrigued her. She knew that tomorrow would bring new lessons, new interactions, and perhaps the beginning of something that could change everything. She felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. She was here not just to cook, but to grow, to learn, and to find her place in a world far beyond the one she had known. The next morning, the manor was alive with activity. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting the hallways in warm shades of gold. Amara had grown more comfortable with the kitchen and the staff, but her thoughts kept returning to Cale. He was a puzzle she wanted to understand, and the more she observed him, the more she sensed there was a depth beneath his rugged exterior that very few people had ever glimpsed. As she prepared breakfast, she found herself noticing the little details, the way he walked with careful purpose, the way his eyes softened when he was unaware of being observed, the subtle tension in his shoulders that hinted at a life filled with responsibility and challenges. Amara's curiosity was growing, and she realized that her work here was no longer just about cooking. It was about learning this household, learning the people within it, and in some small way, connecting with Cale. That morning, Cale entered the kitchen earlier than usual. Amara looked up, trying to appear composed, though her pulse quickened at the sight of him. He did not speak immediately, as was often his way. Instead, he watched her move, observing her hands as they kneaded dough, chopped vegetables, and arranged ingredients. There was an intensity in his gaze, but it was different this time, less judgmental, more curious. "Your timing is precise," he said after a moment, his voice calm. "Most would be late at this hour." Amara smiled faintly. "I want to make sure everything is ready," she replied. "For the staff, for you, for everyone in the household." Cale's eyes softened slightly at her words.
"Good," he said.
"Attention to detail matters here. It is not just about cooking. It is about understanding the rhythm of this place." Amara nodded, sensing that beneath his stern exterior there was a lesson he wanted to share. She continued her work, but she now did so with a heightened awareness of his presence. It was as though every movement mattered, not just in the kitchen, but in the way she carried herself. She wanted to show that she was capable, not only in skill but in understanding the unspoken expectations of this house. Later that morning, Cale approached her with a small tray of ingredients. "Try this combination," he suggested, placing fresh herbs and spices in front of her. "Experiment. Find the balance." Amara looked at the ingredients thoughtfully. She recognized some immediately, while others were new to her. She smiled inwardly at the challenge, grateful that he trusted her to make decisions. "I will try," she said, arranging them carefully and beginning to test flavors. As she worked, Cale watched quietly, occasionally offering brief comments. "A little less of this, a little more of that," he said, guiding her without ever taking control. Amara felt a thrill of connection. It was as though they were working together, not just as master and cook, but as collaborators in a delicate dance. She had never felt this kind of engagement in her work before, and it deepened her respect for him. During a brief break, Cale gestured for her to follow him to the courtyard. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of flowers and earth. Sunlight warmed their faces, and the quiet hum of the manor seemed to surround them. Cale leaned against a stone bench, his usual stoicism in place. Yet there was a subtle invitation in his gaze. "You are different from the others," he said finally, his tone softer than usual. "You notice details. You adapt quickly, and you do not let nerves control you." Amara felt her cheeks warm at his words. "I have learned to work hard," she said. "I want to be better than I was yesterday. That is all." Cale regarded her silently for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Ambition is rare. Most are content with mediocrity. But you—" His voice trailed off and he turned to look at the garden. Amara followed his gaze, sensing that there was more beneath the surface, a story he was not yet ready to share. For the rest of the day they worked together in the kitchen. Cale's presence, once intimidating, had become a guiding force. Amara felt herself growing not only as a cook but as a person, learning patience, precision, and subtlety. Their exchanges, though often quiet, carried an undercurrent of understanding, a shared recognition of effort and skill. As evening approached, Amara prepared a special dish she had been thinking about all day, a roasted vegetable medley with a fragrant herb sauce. She plated it carefully, arranging each piece with precision and care. Cale sampled it, his expression unreadable, and Amara held her breath. After a long pause, he looked at her, and for the first time a small smile touched his lips. "This is good," he said simply. "Better than expected." Amara felt a rush of pride and relief. His words were few, but they carried meaning. They spoke of acknowledgement, trust, and a rare appreciation that she had come to value deeply. She realized that their relationship was changing, shifting from distance and observation to one of mutual respect and cautious curiosity. The following days brought more opportunities for connection. Cale began to involve her in planning meals, discussing ingredients, and sharing small insights about the household's needs. Amara listened carefully, absorbing each lesson, but she also noticed that Cale was opening up in subtle ways. He would occasionally share brief stories from his past, moments of challenge, times of solitude, experiences that shaped who he was. They were never complete, but they were enough for Amara to sense the man beneath the rugged exterior. One afternoon, as they prepared an afternoon tea for the staff, a gentle rain began to fall outside. The sound of raindrops against the windows created a soothing rhythm, and the warm light of the kitchen gave the room a sense of intimacy. Cale suggested a new combination of herbs for the tea, and Amara experimented, carefully tasting and adjusting the flavors. As she worked, she noticed him watching her again, his expression thoughtful. She paused, looking up at him. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Cale shook his head. "No. I am simply observing. You have a natural rhythm. Most would be clumsy or unsure, but you move with purpose." Amara felt a strange warmth at his words. It was not just praise, it was recognition, a rare acknowledgement that he noticed effort and skill. For the first time, she felt that she was not just a newcomer, but a valued presence in the manor, someone who could contribute in meaningful ways. That evening, after the household had settled, Cale invited her to join him for a brief walk in the courtyard. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of earth and freshness. Moonlight reflected off the wet cobblestones, creating a silver glow that made the garden seem almost magical. Amara felt a quiet thrill. She had never walked so closely with him before, outside the formalities of the kitchen.
"You have adapted quickly," Cale said, his voice soft in the night air.
Few do in the first week. Amara smiled, feeling a connection she could not fully explain. "I like learning," she replied. "And I want to do well. This place, it is unlike anything I have ever known." Cale nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the distant trees. "Good. That determination will serve you well. And it is rare to find someone who does not fear the unknown." Amara looked at him, sensing the depth behind his words. There was a vulnerability there, hidden beneath the layers of authority and strength. She felt a desire to understand him, to see the man behind the warrior, but she also knew that trust could not be rushed. It had to grow, slowly, through shared experiences and quiet recognition. As they returned to the manor, Amara realized that something subtle but important had shifted between them. The fear and intimidation she had felt on her first day were replaced by curiosity, respect, and an emerging sense of connection. She felt that Cale, too, was beginning to recognize her presence, not just as a cook, but as someone who mattered, someone whose efforts he valued. That night, as she prepared for bed, Amara reflected on the days that had passed. She had faced new challenges, learned new skills, and navigated the complex dynamics of the manor. But more than that, she had begun to understand a man who, despite his rugged exterior and quiet intensity, had a depth and vulnerability that few had seen. She felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come, knowing that their connection would continue to grow, shaped by shared work, mutual respect, and the slow unfolding of trust. As she drifted off to sleep, Amara thought about the future. She did not know what awaited her, but she felt certain that her life in this manor would be transformative. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, in the shadows of the grand halls and the warmth of the kitchen, a bond was forming, subtle, tentative, but undeniable. It was a bond that promised challenges, lessons, and perhaps even something more, something that neither of them could yet name. Days passed in the manor, each one blending routine with subtle discoveries. Amara had grown more confident in her role, her hands moving with ease through the familiar rhythm of chopping, stirring, and plating. Yet as much as she had learned to navigate the kitchen and the household, she could not shake a growing sense of unease. There was a quiet tension in the air she could not name, a ripple beneath the calm, a shadow that hinted at troubles yet unseen. One afternoon, as she prepared ingredients for dinner, a sharp knock echoed through the manor's front doors. Amara paused, listening as footsteps approached the kitchen. Maris, the housekeeper, appeared with a hurried look on her face. "Amara," she whispered, "there has been news. Someone from the past has arrived at the estate. The master, he may be troubled."
Amara felt a knot tighten in her stomach.
She had known Cale to be reserved, to live quietly in the manor, removed from outside affairs. The idea of someone from his past appearing here unexpectedly stirred a mixture of fear and curiosity. She nodded slowly, careful not to show her worry. "I understand. Thank you for telling me." That evening, as the sky turned golden with the setting sun, Cale entered the kitchen, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a subtle tension. His eyes, dark and penetrating, seemed even more distant than usual. He moved with precision, but there was a tightness in his jaw, a sharpness to his movements that Amara had never seen before. She realized that the news Maris had shared was true. Something had disturbed him.
"I need tonight's dinner prepared quickly," Cale said, his tone sharper than usual.
"We have visitors, unwelcome ones." Amara's hands worked swiftly, chopping, stirring, and arranging the ingredients, her mind racing with questions. Who had come? Why was Cale so tense? And most importantly, how would she navigate this new challenge? She had learned to respect his authority, to follow his guidance, but the uncertainty in his demeanor left her unsettled. When the visitor arrived, the manner seemed to grow colder. A man appeared, tall and imposing, with a presence that mirrored Cale's own in intensity. There was a familiarity between the two men, unspoken but clear in the way their eyes met. Amara watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart racing as she realized that this was someone from Cale's past, someone who carried both history and tension. Cale's response was measured, but there was a subtle hardness to his voice. "What brings you here after all these years?" he asked. The visitor's reply was calm, almost casual, but there was an underlying challenge in his words. Amara could see the strain in Cale's posture, the way his hands clenched briefly before relaxing. It was clear that this encounter was not just routine. It was personal, and it carried weighty consequences. Throughout the evening, Amara prepared the meal, feeling the tension in the room like a physical presence. She moved with care, aware that every action mattered. Cale occasionally glanced at her, his eyes softening briefly before returning to the visitor. There was a moment when he looked directly at her, his gaze carrying both reassurance and unspoken warning. He trusted her to do her part, but he also knew that the world outside the manor could bring unexpected complications. As the meal progressed, the conversation between Cale and the visitor grew more tense. Words were measured, polite on the surface, but each sentence carried an edge. Amara could sense Cale's struggle, his desire to maintain control, to protect the manor and its inhabitants, and to confront his past without letting it dominate his present. She realized in that moment that the calm, composed man she had seen was not invulnerable. There were layers to him, challenges he faced silently, and she was witnessing a rare glimpse of vulnerability. After the visitor left, the manor settled into an uneasy quiet. Cale retreated to his study, closing the door behind him. Amara stood in the kitchen, her mind racing. She felt the weight of the evening, the tension, the silent challenges, and the subtle threat that had hung over them. Yet she also felt a strange determination. She had come here to be part of this world, and now she understood that part of her role was to stand steady, even when shadows from the past surfaced. The following days were difficult. Cale's demeanor remained tense, and the manor itself seemed to carry the echo of the visitor's arrival. Amara worked diligently, aware of every movement, every action, every detail. She sensed that Cale was grappling with more than she could see, and she wanted to support him without overstepping boundaries. Their connection, which had begun to blossom, now faced a test, one that required patience, understanding, and resilience. One evening, Cale asked her to assist with a special preparation in the kitchen. He worked silently beside her, his hands precise, his movements sharp. Amara followed his guidance carefully, sensing that this was more than just cooking. It was a way for him to channel his focus, to regain control amidst the tension. As they worked together, she noticed small shifts in his expression. Moments of softness appeared briefly, then faded, replaced by determination and focus. She realized that Cale's strength was not only in his skill, but in his ability to maintain composure, even when challenged by his past. During a quiet moment, Cale spoke, his voice low. "The past. It has a way of finding us, even when we try to leave it behind. We can only face it," she said gently, "and keep moving forward." Cale's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the tension softened. There was a recognition of her presence, her understanding, and her steady support. It was not an expression of romance or familiarity. It was respect, trust, and acknowledgement. Amara felt a quiet pride, knowing that even in his challenges, she could be a part of his strength. The conflict escalated when a storm hit the manor one night. The rain fell in heavy sheets, and wind rattled the windows. A minor mishap in the kitchen, a spilled pot, a burnt sauce, triggered a tense moment. Cale's response was controlled, but firm. "Focus matters," he said. "Even in chaos, attention cannot falter." Amara nodded, steadying herself. She realized that this moment was not just about the kitchen. It was about the lessons of resilience and composure, about facing difficulties without losing control. She worked carefully, her hands moving with precision, and slowly the kitchen regained its rhythm. Cale observed, a faint nod acknowledging her recovery. In the following days, the tension began to ease, though the shadow of the visitor's arrival lingered. Cale's interactions with Amara became slightly warmer, though still measured. There was a subtle acknowledgement in his eyes, a recognition that she had faced challenges alongside him, that she had adapted and remained steady. Their connection deepened, built not on casual conversation or shared laughter, but on shared experiences, mutual respect, and resilience in the face of conflict. One evening, after the household had settled, Cale invited Amara to join him in the courtyard. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Moonlight reflected off the wet cobblestones, creating a silver glow that illuminated their path. For a moment neither spoke, and the silence was filled with understanding. "You have faced much," Cale said quietly. "More than most would in their first days here." Amara looked at him, sensing the depth behind his words. "I want to be part of this world," she replied. "Even the challenges, even the shadows." Cale's gaze lingered on her, and for the first time he allowed a small, genuine smile to appear. "You are stronger than I thought," he said. "Few possess that courage." Amara felt a warmth in her chest, not just from his words, but from the recognition of her own resilience. She realized that despite the tension, the fear, and the challenges, she had found her place in the manor. She was no longer just a newcomer. She was part of its rhythm, part of its unfolding story. And Cale, in his own quiet, measured way, had begun to see her not just as a cook, but as someone who could stand beside him in both calm and storm. That night, as Amara prepared for bed, she reflected on the past days. The shadow of the visitor's arrival had tested them, had brought tension and uncertainty. Yet it had also revealed strength, both in Cale and in herself. She realized that challenges were not just obstacles. They were opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. And she felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come, knowing that their bond, though tested, had become stronger. As she drifted into sleep, Amara thought of Cale, the manor and the challenges they had faced together. She knew that the journey was far from over. Shadows from the past might return, and new challenges would inevitably arise. But she also knew that she was not alone. Through respect, understanding, and shared determination, she had become part of a story far larger than herself, one that promised growth, connection, and the quiet promise of something deeper yet to come. The manor had finally returned to its usual rhythm. The storm from the past days had passed, and the tension that had hung over the house had begun to ease. The corridors were quiet but not empty, the kitchen bustling yet calm, and the air carried a sense of peace that had been absent before. Yet for Amara, there was an anticipation she could not shake. She had grown accustomed to Cale's presence, to his subtle guidance, to the unspoken connection that had been building between them. And now she sensed that something significant was about to happen. That morning, Cale entered the kitchen earlier than usual. The faint sunlight cast shadows across his rugged features, making him look both commanding and thoughtful. He observed Amara as she worked, her hands moving with practiced skill, her movements confident and precise. He had watched her grow over the past weeks, seen her adapt to the demands of the manor, and recognized a strength in her that matched his own resilience. "Amara," he said quietly, drawing her attention. "I need your help with something important." She looked up, curiosity and a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "Of course, sir. What is it?" Cale led her to a small, private section of the manor, a room he rarely allowed anyone to enter. Inside, papers, maps, and various documents were scattered across a large wooden table. The sight was daunting, but Amara felt a spark of excitement. This was unfamiliar territory, a chance to see a part of Cale's world that was normally hidden. "There is something I must resolve," Cale said, his voice steady but carrying a weight of responsibility. "The past has a way of lingering, even when we try to move forward. I need to face it fully, and I want you here." Amara's heart quickened. She realized that the challenges they had faced before, the visitor, the storm, the tension, were only part of a larger struggle Cale carried within him, and now he was trusting her to be present, to stand with him and to share the burden, even in a small way. She nodded. "I'll stay." Whatever you need me to do, I'll help. For hours, they worked together. Cale explained the situation, an unresolved matter from his past that had lingered as a quiet threat. It required careful attention, strategy, and courage. Amara listened intently, offering her insights when appropriate. Her mind sharp and focused, she felt a sense of purpose, knowing that her presence was meaningful not just in the kitchen, but in Cale's life as well. As the day turned into evening, they made significant progress. Cale's usual intensity softened slightly as he shared memories and plans, and Amara felt a deeper understanding of the man behind the rugged exterior. She saw the strength it took for him to confront challenges he had long avoided, and she realized that this was a defining moment, not only for him, but for their connection. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Cale asked her to step outside with him. The courtyard was bathed in the warm glow of twilight, the air calm and scented with night-blooming flowers. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the sky change colors. The world felt suspended, as if holding its breath for what was to come. "You have stood by me through uncertainty," Cale said finally, his voice low and steady. "You have faced challenges I did not think anyone could endure, and yet you did so with courage, patience, and understanding."
Amara felt a warmth rise in her chest. "I believe in facing things together," she said softly.
I wanted to help, and I wanted to understand. Cale's gaze softened, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and something deeper, a vulnerability he rarely allowed to surface. He took a slow step closer, his presence commanding yet inviting. "There is something I must say," he murmured, his voice carrying the weight of sincerity. "Through everything, the challenges, the uncertainty, the quiet moments, I have realized that I do not want to face this life alone." She had sensed their bond growing, had felt it in their shared work, in the quiet moments, and in the subtle recognition of each other's strengths. Yet hearing his words, spoken with such honesty and clarity, made the connection undeniable. Cale stepped closer, and for the first time he allowed himself a gesture of openness. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch firm but reassuring. "Stay with me," he said, his voice steady yet tender. "Not just here, in this house, but in my life. I cannot face what comes next without you." Amara felt a rush of emotion. She had come to the manor to cook, to find purpose, and to grow. But she had found more than that. She had found a connection that touched her heart in ways she had not expected. She nodded, her eyes shining with understanding and trust.
"I will,"
she whispered.
"I will stay."
The manor, the courtyard, the quiet world around them seemed to pause, acknowledging the bond they had forged through respect, patience, and shared experiences. Cale's rugged exterior softened completely, replaced by the quiet warmth of someone who had found a partner, an equal, and someone he could trust completely. In the days that followed, life in the manor returned to a peaceful rhythm. The shadow of past challenges had lifted, replaced by a sense of harmony and purpose. Amara continued her work in the kitchen, her confidence growing with each dish she prepared. Cale observed her often, offering guidance and encouragement, but always allowing her to shine independently. Their connection deepened naturally, built on trust, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding that they were stronger together. One afternoon, as they worked side by side preparing a special dinner, Cale looked at Amara and said,
"You have changed this house, not just with your cooking, but with your presence."
"It is brighter, lighter, better." Amara smiled, feeling the truth in his words. "We all contribute," she said. "And I have learned so much from you too." Cale's gaze softened. "And yet, it is you who has brought something I did not know I needed," he admitted. "Your courage, your patience, your care, it has changed me." Amara felt a quiet joy, knowing that their journey had not only been about overcoming challenges, but also about discovering connection, understanding, and trust. She realized that the manor, with all its grandeur and history, had become a home, not just for her, but for both of them, built on shared experiences, and mutual respect. As evening fell, they shared a quiet moment in the courtyard, watching the stars emerge in the sky. The night was calm, the air cool and fragrant. Cale took her hand again, his grip gentle and reassuring. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "Whatever comes, I want you by my side." Amara nodded, her heart full. "I will be," she said. "Through everything, I will stay." The stars above seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the quiet promise between them. They stood together, side by side, knowing that the challenges of the past had strengthened them, that the bonds they had forged were real and lasting, and that the future, though unknown, would be faced together. In the following weeks, life in the manor settled into a joyful routine. Amara continued to explore her creativity in the kitchen, trying new recipes, experimenting with flavors, and delighting the household with her dishes. Cale supported her, offering subtle guidance and encouragement, yet always respecting her independence. Their connection grew in quiet, meaningful ways. Shared glances, small conversations, and moments of understanding that spoke louder than words. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Cale approached her with a tray of tea. "To celebrate," he said, smiling faintly. "Not for the house, not for me, but for you. For all that you have done and all that you are." Amara felt a warmth spread through her. She realized that she had found more than a purpose. She had found a place where she belonged, and a man who respected, trusted, and valued her completely. She accepted the tea with a smile, their hands brushing lightly, and knew that this was the life she had been seeking. Not just the work, not just the manner, but a connection built on understanding, courage, and shared hearts. As night fell, Amara and Cale stood together in the quiet courtyard once more. The manor was peaceful, the air still, and the world around them seemed to recognize the bond they had formed. Cale wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, and whispered again, "Stay with me." And this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Amara rested her head against his chest, feeling the strength and warmth of someone who had become both her protector and her equal.
"I will stay,"
she said softly, her voice full of certainty. Together they watched the stars, knowing that life would bring challenges, joys, and unknown paths. But they also knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side, stronger together, bound by trust, respect, and a quiet, unwavering love that had grown from the simplest beginnings: a shared kitchen, a shared purpose,